Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today we are going to finish off the horrifying encounters submitted by subscribers out of the great state of Pennsylvania. Today, this has got to be one of the most horrifying encounters that I have heard out of that state, if not in the top 10 of all encounters that I've heard. Before we get into it, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click the like button. It takes a second, if of that. And please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things help. And they definitely matter. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get into today's subscriber-submitted encounter out of that great state of Pennsylvania. Shall we? Alright, guys. So, really quick. Last night's upload, last night's second half, those last 4 video clips that are of recent are absolutely horrifying. And if you really think about everything that we talk about on the channel and that he mentions is going on in his home and on his land, I was thinking about this, and it doesn't sound like anything but a Dogman. The growls that you could hear in the background, the howls, the creature on the roof, the eye shine, it just all points to Dogman, especially coming from Michigan. In my eyes, I have not seen a more convincing video besides Kirk Stokes. I'd have to say they are pretty close. And a couple of people were like, one person commented that the kid had a grin on his face. He was not grinning at all. The way I cut that video, you couldn't see his eyes. He was almost in tears at one point. And I had left a comment at one person because it was just so ridiculous and how cruel they were. And the salary. These people aren't into cryptids like we are. They don't realize, well, obviously now they're realizing what they're dealing with, but they are trying to just figure out what is going on, you know? And I don't know why or what possessed him to use salary on that trap. But all he was trying to do was catch its hand, nothing else. But, you know, it's just crazy. You play something for people and they're like, oh, they'll pick it apart. But yet some AI-generated creepypasta channel that talks about park rangers all the time, and they put an AI-generated video on, and people will fall over themselves with just astonishment. And it's like what I said the other day when I was talking about how people really thought this movie on Amazon called The Horror in the High Desert was real, when they could have simply Googled it and found out that it was a found fiction horror movie. Like, you know, it just, I'm never, I guess, some people and their views never cease to amaze me. And how just insensitive some people can be, That young man was not smiling about his dog being found torn apart. So I just wanted to bring that up because it really ticked me off. And, I probably shouldn't have commented back what I did, but I did. And I try not to. And that's why I don't go in the comment section sometimes. But it just popped up on my feed, that comment. So anyway, let's get into the real reason why you're all here today. Hey Jeff, how are you? This is my experience and I'd really like to share it with you. In the first week of May 2020, I had an encounter that I'm still having issues coming to terms with. Due to reasons I will explain in this, I am not comfortable giving my name or details of exactly where this happened. I'm a pretty normal guy living in Delaware on the border of southeastern Pennsylvania. I'm a lover of the outdoors, and in the past few years, I've not had the time to really get out into nature and get my much needed dose of the natural world. In 2019, I opened my own online business, and due to recent COVID-19 pandemic and the whole world being stuck at home on their computers, my sales tripled the first half of this year. I have 2 children who are very responsible and trustworthy teenagers. My girlfriend works at a local hospital and is considered an essential worker. So the pandemic has kept her very busy this year. I also turned 40 this year, and for the first time in my adult life, I've had some time on my hands and was itching to get away from civilization. I have an internet hotspot router built into my SUV that works almost anywhere, no matter how remote. So with a laptop, I figured I could work from the road and take a few days and go fishing and breathe some fresh air. Neither of the teenagers were interested in joining me, and like I said, my girlfriend was far too busy with work, so I took my best friend, a 120-pound pit bull lab mix named Pete. He makes a great camping dog because he's incredibly lazy, and I never have to worry about him running off, chasing deer or anything. He will always lie on his blanket next to the fire all day and night unless I make him head out with me. But as I've learned while camping with Pete, if coyotes, bear, or any other predators come around, he snaps out of his laziness and protects the camp. Despite his easygoing demeanor, Pete is pretty intimidating, as he is 120-pound, all muscle, no fat, which always blows my mind because of how lazy he is. I try to go camping at least once a year, and when I do, I usually rough it with a small tent and whatever I can carry on my back. But this time I decided I wanted to have as many comforts of home and really pamper myself. So I hitched my 10-foot enclosed cargo trailer to my very large SUV, filled it with all the things I would want to really be comfy. I brought a full-sized backyard grill, a 12x12 pop-up canopy, an air mattress, 2 large coolers full of food, and a fancy 6-person tent. The campground I decided to go to is a large one that is mostly used by RV kind of crowd. But at the far end, right next to the best fishing area, they have a half a dozen just plain old campsites with no power or water hookup. My campsite was bordered by about 50 yards of thick woods that separated my camp from the large, fast-moving stream that is well known to be one of the best trout fishing spots in the whole state. On the other side of the stream is a steep mountainside that is covered in rock overhangs and small caves. It is a beautiful area, and I love falling asleep to the sound of the water. I set up the camp so that my SUV, trailer, and pop-up canopy kind of made a U-shape and block out most of the view into my area from the rest of the campers. I rented my campsite for a full week starting on May 1st, Friday. which was the first day that the state opened its state parks and campgrounds to the public since the pandemic shutdown back in March. I arrived at the campground at about midday on Friday, and the place was packed. I spent most of the day getting my campsite set up, getting to know my temporary neighbors, and cooking some ribeye steaks, burgers, and vegetables on the grill. The weather in central PA in early May is pretty much perfect. So I decided to sleep in the tent each night with Pete and turned my trailer into my mobile office, where I kept my computer, internet goods, mailing packages, and even a printer for printing postage. This way I could work an hour or so each morning, get my orders packed up, and drive the 20 minutes into the nearest town. Once every few days, get my orders shipped out. I remember thinking that I wish I could convince my girlfriend and the kids to sell everything and move into the woods and live just like this. The weekend was crazy busy at the campground, and the creek was lined with fishermen as far as the eye could see. So I decided to do some hiking and exploring into the surrounding wilderness with Pete instead of fighting 10 people for the same fish all day. It felt great to get out to where I belong, to the woods. The only negative was that it rained on and off that weekend while I was hiking, but to be honest, when you camp in Pennsylvania, you should expect to get rained on pretty regularly. On the afternoon of Sunday the 3rd of May, the campground cleared out pretty fast, and by sundown there was only a few active campsites left. I'd gotten to know the 2 guys in the campsite directly next to mine, and we hung around a few hours for a night while I drank some hot tea and they smoked joints like they were cigarettes. Needless to say, they were always hungry and seemed pleased to have me as their next-door neighbor, with my full-sized grill and enough food to feed a small army. For the next few days, I worked online, fished the creek, and explored the mountains of the area on foot with my dog. We also like to just walk the campground itself and stop and talk with scattered campers who didn't leave during the weekdays. On Tuesday afternoon, a few of them told me about a black bear who had made his way into a more accessible side of the campground and raided their camps the night before. This had me a little concerned because of the full-sized grill was sitting out open at my camp, and I had been cooking delicious food on it for days on end. I debated putting the grill inside of the enclosed trailer at night, but laziness got the best of me and I left it out. Central Pennsylvania has a rather large black bear population, and I was already aware of this. So at night I slept with a Mossberg Maverick 88 12-gauge shotgun loaded with double-aught buck in the tent with Pete, and I just in case a rogue bear posed a danger to us. I had forgotten to pack my Ruger Redhawk 44 mag for hiking, so while out in the woods I had to rely on my Smith & Wesson Shield 45 ACP that I already had on my hip when we left home. It was not ideal, but I figured it was better than nothing. On the night of Tuesday, May 5th, my new friends and I cooked up some barbecued chicken thighs, baked beans, baked some potatoes wrapped in aluminum foil in my fire pit. They produced a small bottle of vodka as well, and we made a few orange soda spiked drinks to go along with our fancy campsite dinner. All the food and drinks combined with too much fun had us worn out a little earlier than planned, so we parted ways and got ourselves prepared to crash for the night. A night that would prove to be the most terrifying night of our lives. At around 10 p.m., I loaded 4 shells of buckshot into my shotgun, got into my tent, got it all squared away, lied down in the tent with my dog next to me on his bed and his blanket. I put some Citizen Journalist news on my phone and one headphone in the right ear to keep my left clear to listen to my surroundings and to enjoy the sounds of nature. My tent was pitched close to the tree line with the rear of the tent facing the woods. The noise of the frogs and insects at night were super loud, almost a song that put me to sleep better than any lullaby ever could. The next thing I remember is waking up and my eyes popping open to some kind of hollow metallic noise just outside of my campsite. I lie there perfectly still with my heart slamming from the quick spike of adrenaline that flooded my veins. Then bang, I heard the lid of my grill slam shut. I stuck a fairly bright solar-powered motion light on the side of my trailer that lit up my small U-shaped courtyard area of vehicles and tents. My tent was facing the open part of the U, and I could see that my motion light was on and someone, or something, was moving around my campsite casting shadows as it went. I looked at Pete to my right, and he's still lying down, but his head is up, and his eyes are as big as ping pong balls. He's clearly hearing what I'm hearing, but I found it strange that he was still silent. It was then that I noticed the usual deafening noise of frogs and insects in the woods behind me was not there. Then I heard whatever it was breathing. It was a hoarse, deep breathing, and that was when I thought to myself, bear. I could hear it walking around, thump, thump, thump. The next I heard it at my trailer, pulling at the side door, trying to get inside. So I sat up and grabbed my 12 gauge. One thing about black bears is that they are not the bravest animals, and usually any man-made noise will almost always make them run in fear. So I racked the slide of my shotgun as loud as I could and chambered a shell instead of running. The creature stopped moving and went silent. I could feel the fear building up inside of me as I pretty much held my breath and listened. And to my horror, it started walking toward the tent. It was then that I saw this shadow take shape as it drew closer. It was on 2 feet and apparently huge. I sat there in terror and disbelief as it came right up to the front of my tent, breathing like a giant monster. I said out loud, "Whoever you are, you have a 12 gauge pointed right at you. You better sound off." Right then it leaned forward to my tent and let out the most terrifying deep growl I'd ever heard in my life. At that moment, Pete whined softly and cowered his head down. It was then that the shadow of its head was clearly visible. It had a giant head of a wolf with 2 pointed ears. As it was growling at me, I could hear my neighbors talking to each other, and one of them shined a flashlight at this creature. When the light hit the side of the creature's face, I saw its eyes light up this golden LED color. It turned its face towards the flashlight, and I could hear my friends gasp, "Holy crap!" Then it turned its attention back to me and growled again. I decided that if I didn't do something, this thing was going to, and possibly kill me and Pete. So I lied back onto my sleeping bag, took aim at the shadow of this monster's head, and pulled the trigger. What followed was complete and total pandemonium. The monster screamed and roared at the same time. It was like the death scream of a woman mixed with the roar of a large lion. Pete finally snapped out of his fear, jumped up, and started barking ferociously. The thing ran off, from what I could tell from the loud thump, and it must have ran straight into my trailer. I clambered up and quickly unzipped the tent and poked my head outside to see. It had gotten to its feet and then ran straight into the picnic table, did a flip onto the ground, started grabbing its face and thrashing around. I could see that there was blood everywhere on the trailer. I jumped out of the tent while chambering another shell. I aimed as best as I could with my whole body shaking violently, and right as it started to get up, I shot it again a second time. I'm not entirely sure if I hit it with the second shot. It stood straight up and I pumped the gun and shot again. The third shot dropped it again, so I was terrified and taken back at how tall it was when it stood up, and I tripped over my own feet and fell backwards. Just then I heard more gunfire erupt behind me, and I turned to see my 2 neighbors unloading a revolver into this creature. maybe 20 yards away. The creature was on its side and was kind of running in circles on the ground, gurgling and spraying blood from its face and neck as it was gasping. As it was doing this death spiral on the ground, it was moving closer to me. I tried to pump the shotty again, but I was shaking so bad it took 3 attempts before the last shell was chambered. I just pointed and shot without aiming, and I could see the hump on its back of its neck rip open and spray blood everywhere. I was really close to it at this point. The monster stopped flipping out, and its limbs were twitching while its head remained fully animated, flopping back and forth for at least another 10 seconds. I crawled quickly backwards away from it, trying to stand up. I realized once that I had stood up that I'd been holding my breath this entire time, and when I got to my feet, my vision started to go black, and I fell over again. My new friend ran up and grabbed me with his arms and started pulling me up. I stood up shaking badly. I looked at the guy with the revolver. His eyes were huge and full of terror. When I started looking around, there were at least another 5 people showing up there with the same wild-eyed expression. I saw that at least 3 of them had come over with their guns. People were yelling and asking each other what had happened and checking to see if I was injured because I had blood all over my clothes and face. It all happened quickly, but as it often told by people facing traumatic events, it seemed like it was in slow motion to me. My dog is still barking, going crazy, so I did my best to calm him down. While hugging him, I could feel his shaking. Before long, a small crowd had formed of people, and they were on their phones calling 911. After a minute or so, a few guys and myself approached this beast lying there, occasionally twitching. We all stood over it, saying WTF over and over. Eventually, as we started saying the werewolf, in disbelief, all at once, people all started taking pictures with their phones. Mine was still in the tent. This horrifying dog creature was dead. The top half of its head was basically gone, including both of its eyes and the top of its snout. I assumed that the first shot I had made from the tent. The front of its neck was completely shredded, and the back of its neck was missing a large chunk of meat. Other than that, it was pretty much impossible to see exactly what other injuries it had sustained, as it was completely covered from head to toe in blood. But we were all pretty much sure it had taken buckshot or .357 magnums to the chest. There was a small river of blood running through the camp and right past my tent from the puddle that surrounded the creature. It was a lot of blood. It was on its side, and after a few minutes we summoned the courage to grab a large stick and flip it over onto its back. It was definitely a male, as it had a large set of balls larger than my fists. It was huge. We never measured it, but it was longer than any man I'd ever seen. It had a dog-like legs, weird-shaped paws with kind of a small heel for feet. Looking back, I'm impressed that it was able to balance such a large body on feet so small. It had really skinny lower legs and pretty thick upper legs. It had arms pretty much like a human's with long fingers that had filthy-looking claws, maybe 3 to 4 inches long. I noticed it was missing the top half of a finger from the battle. Then the second wave of terror hit us all at once. Howling of multiple animals sounded off in the direction of the mountain behind the creek. We all looked at each other, and I could see that same big-eyed look go over everyone's faces. I ran to my tent and clumsily loaded the shotgun with full 5 rounds this time and grabbed my .45 as well and clipped it to my side instead of my waistband. I also grabbed my phone. All of a sudden, everyone was done looking at the werewolf creature, and were looking into the woods in the direction of the howling. It kept up for a few minutes. We could hear howling getting further and further away. The police, game warden, and paramedics showed up all at once. I could see the flashing lights, that they had blocked the entrance to the campsite up at the hill in the distance. The police officers were just surprised and freaked out as we were when they first saw the creature. The two game wardens looked worried, not surprised. They told everyone else not to take any pictures and made everyone clear the general area. The wardens were both on their phones almost the entire time. The paramedics cleared everyone and tried to get me to agree to go to the hospital and get checked out, but I refused. The only injury that I had was my hearing, as I was half deaf for a few days from the gunfire and noise. The paramedics were also very silent and looking worried, much like the game wardens. The police took my shotgun and revolver from the neighbor. They let me keep my .45. They made everyone else put their guns away. And anyone who was there was rounded up for questioning. Everyone was told to stay off their phones, which was not much of a problem as only a few people's phones got signal in the campground. When I asked the game wardens what the hell this thing was, they said they didn't know, but it looked like some kind of mutant bear or large canine. A few hours later, an SUV full of guys show up. They were all carrying large Glocks and dressed in cargo pants and tees. They immediately took me and the others who were involved aside and began questioning us. They told us that they were federal fish and game. They were very interested in the howling we heard after the battle occurred. They must have asked me 10 times about how close it sounded and where it sounded and what it sounded like, etc. They also repeated to me 10 times that I was not to tell anyone what happened, and they would get to the bottom of things and find out what I had encountered. They told me to tell anyone who asked about my trailer that I had to shoot an aggressive black bear. I assumed they told my neighbors and anyone else who was at the scene the same thing. They made us open our phones and go through our phones and delete any pictures we had taken. They also told me that if any pictures were to come out of this creature, that it was to spell trouble for anyone who had them. They threatened me with all kinds of trouble if this got out. They did not try to pretend that I was seeing things. They just point blank and politely asked not to talk about it and to lie about the trailer damage. It would seem that I was asleep for only a couple of hours before this Dogman showed up. By around 4 a.m., the officials had already gotten to everyone in the campground, and I assumed the other people were told it was a bear and made to pack up and get ready to go. They said it was not safe, and they closed the campground until they were sure it was safe. After the Dogman was bagged and tagged, a small fire truck was brought in. The blood was hosed off my trailer, vehicle, and tables. Everything else, and the blood on the ground was hosed into the woods behind my tent. Then a few guys wiped my trailer down, and the vehicle with soapy water and hosed them off. Regular old duct tape was put in the holes on my trailer. They took my tent, bloody clothes, bloody slippers as evidence along with my shotgun. Right before I left, they gave me back my shotgun, wiped down and unloaded. They told me to fill my tank at the closest town and drive straight home without stopping. They repeated this 3 times. Since all of this, I've learned everything I can about what I encountered. I listen to Dogman, Wolfman encounters day and night now, and I came across your channel. I figured I would reach out to you. I am amazed that the authorities were able to keep such a noisy event with so many witnesses under wraps. I've been searching for anyone to come forth with anything about the campground closing in the news, and nothing. I am not interested in putting myself out there any more than this for right now. I'm almost as scared of the agents as I am the Dogmen, but all in all, they genuinely seemed concerned for my well-being. All right, really quick, I apologize for the noise. People were walking down the street yelling at each other. Don't ask me why. So, after he reached out to me, shared this, I had sent him an email and I was like, wow, this is incredible. Thank you for sharing it with me. He had used one of those disposable emails, and he more or less was trying to share the experience because he was looking for other people who may have been at that campground. And here's the next email that he sent me. Hey Jeff, I was reading through the comments on the show. A few people had questions, it seems. No, none of the guys in the Denali had long guns, just large Glocks. I asked the older southern gentleman what kind of it was, and he said a Glock 20 10mm. I really didn't give it all that much detail of the description of the monster looking back. The Dogman smelled horrible, like the combination of barnyard mixed with strong dog piss. Also, it did have a tail. A small one, though, maybe 2 feet at its longest compared to its body. The Dogman was dark brown all over. Oddly enough, I do remember that it had some lighter brown stripes on its arms where the blood wasn't totally soaked in the upper arm area. It was fluffied fur, no sparse hair that I hear other people talking about. This one was fully covered in fur like an actual dog, even its arms and legs. But when it stood in front of me, it did seem to have some white in the middle of its chest. I could be wrong, only because I only saw it for a second that way. The next time I saw its chest, it was covered completely in blood. The skin on top of the tip of its snout and under its bottom jaw were both sheared off by the buckshot, but its teeth were undamaged. As it lay there, it had its mouth open, and its teeth were very weird. All of them were pointed, and it seemed like they fit together like a shark or an alligator's mouth would. The teeth were bloody, but very visible. They seemed unnatural to me. My college major involved the study of teeth and fossils, so I have a good understanding of tooth structure and which type of teeth are designed for what, and it would seem that its teeth would only be useful for biting large chunks of flesh off to be swallowed whole, almost like a shark or an alligator. They were not reminiscent of a normal canine in any way after listening to hundreds of encounters in the past few months. A common theme is that they tend to like the softer organs of their prey, while often leaving the meat behind. I wonder if that's because they swallow their meat or their food whole in large chunks. Obviously, softer organs would be much easier than dealing with bone and tough muscle. Just a thought. This is going to sound a bit silly, but I have to say it. There was a feeling of something supernatural right from the beginning, and I can't describe it, but a feeling of something supernatural was even in the air, even when I thought it was a bear. It was like everything felt wrong and reality had ceased to exist for that moment. How would every frog and insect for 100 yards know to be quiet? Why would a land animal like a dogman have teeth like an alligator? How did it keep flipping out and running around with its brains falling out of the top of its head? The very air around me had this weird charge to it. I feel like there was something important about these creatures and that we just don't quite understand them. Give me some more time and I will get a Skype number together this week or next week and give you a call. What's a good time and day usually? And then he gets a little nervous. I trust that you're a good person and all, but I fear that you may be watched due to your uploads. I find it interesting that one agent that really had me cornered for a while that night had a thick southern accent. I suppose he may have come from Victor's Virginia group. I will see if I can put together an online phone number and call you from a proxy server. I'm sorry for the paranoia, but like I said, my life has been going very well except for the encounter I'm terrified of those guys messing with my life. I can't afford things to go sideways for my family and I right now. My state of mind is pretty jumpy these days. I don't even take my trash cans out without a large revolver. If I do get a setup together to call you, what is the best time? If you have any questions in the meantime, go ahead and email them. I will make sure to check your account out. Or this email account out. Because he's using a fake email. And then I text him a little later and check on him. I apologize for not having any answers for him. You know, just basic. I'm trying to, you know, really get a rapport with this guy. But he's friggin' terrified. You know, obviously, we know our government is up to something with all the cases that I cover and their cover-ups and their BS that they do, right? But when I had my encounter, I didn't have an encounter with the men in black. He did. And I can only imagine how fearful and fear-inducing they really are. So his next email. I've been having weird things going on. Someone has been calling my home phone from a different international number and hanging up after 10 seconds of silence. I can tell that it's a landline by the noise it makes while it hangs up. It also lets me know that it's an actual person and not one of those robocalls. A black SUV with a guy who wears a headset with a microphone has been outside of my house in the early mornings. He leaves right before 6:30 a.m., right before rush hour. Yesterday, a white Range Rover pulled into my driveway in the middle of the day. I happened to be working in my kitchen when it happened, so I was facing the window when they did. I saw the two guys in the vehicle sitting and scanning my house and talking to each other. Now, I always carry a gun, even when I'm home alone with the kids, so I popped the button on my holster security strap and went to the front door. The two guys looked at me and casually pulled out of my driveway. I did notice that they had out-of-state plates because they had a white plate on. So at that point, he knew that it was not a Delaware plate. He automatically thinks that it is government, which I do agree with him. And then he kind of falls off the face of the earth for a while. And I email him a little later on just to check on him, see how he's doing. Let him know that he's got a friend in this channel. Not only do I want to hear, I do want to interview him. You know, that really is, because I want to hear how the experience is through his voice. And you guys do too as well. But that's not, you know, he already shared his experience with us. So I'm like, you know, I just want to let him know that there are people out there that have seen these things. Just because a few of us have not had experiences with the government, but he's not alone. You know, so I did reach out to him periodically, and about a year goes by, and he says, "Listen, you know, I shared this experience with your channel first, and I've kept my eye in the comments, but I'm looking to find out if anyone else that was there that night was able to get a picture of this creature out of that park." And, you know, he said, I'm going to share this with a couple other channels. And I said, listen, bro, I said, it's your encounter. It's not mine. It's your encounter. You're free to, you don't have to clear it with me. And I hope that you do find the healing that you're looking for. Because I think what he's really looking for is to know that he wasn't alone in this, that he alone, even though he knew he wasn't alone and other people were there, but I think he was looking for people that were there to make him feel better, to almost reassure him this encounter happened, you know. Just a terrifying encounter. I never will forget the day he sent it to me. You know, it was like a week after, no, 2 or 3 weeks after it happened, the first week of June, I believe. And I was just blown away. I was like, oh my God. I'm like, I almost couldn't wait to share it with you guys, you know. So, well, that wraps up Pennsylvania. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Man, we've got a lot of crazy stuff going on these days. And, you know, we aren't alone. We have each other. And I'm so blessed to have you guys on a daily basis checking out this channel. And I think I'm going to start doing a lot more of these face-to-face. And because of the new subscribers, I'm going to share older encounters. I've got a interview lined up in the next couple of days with a gentleman who lives in my vicinity. Reached out to me via Facebook and said, hey, I had an encounter in Buck Mountain. Now, Buck Mountain is 15, 20 minutes north of me. And it's where he had his experiences almost. It is in Fort Ann. It's close to where my Boy Scout camp was. And the creature that we all talked about, this is before Bigfoot and we were even talking about this stuff, but there was a creature that we used to share stories about called the Hairy H-Man. And so he's coming on, and the events that he shared so far via Talk Messenger is horrible. It's horrifying. It actually, when he first told me, when I listened to the last thing he said to me is they were pushing deer to other people. And I'm like, that's what happened to Tom Mezek. Tom Mezek was sitting down waiting for people to push deer to him. You know, there's such connections between all of these encounters. And they mesh and fit. And here's something crazy. I went to my friend who wrote Phantom Messages, the book there, Mr. Haunted, Jim. He was the cameraman for the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine Warren. He's in that movie Hostage of the Devil, Father Malachi Martin. Now he's going into surgery, so I went and got him a religious gift to kind of watch over him. And I talked to the lady at the store, at the religious store, Christian religion, or whatever, I don't know. And I told her about the channel. And because she was like, you know, I told her what my friend did, and I'm worried about him, and I want to make sure that he's safe and blessed before he goes in for surgery and stuff, and yada, yada. And, you know, she even said about sightings like this. She goes, I don't think that the Bigfoot sightings are all, you know, possibly connected to the end of times that are coming, but a lot of these encounters that people are spotting that aren't Bigfoot, because, I mean, who knows? Bigfoot may just be here living in a alternate dimension, crossing over, not really like, but these creatures, the crawlers, the dogmen, the things that are popping out of portals, and just, it may just be the end of days, my friend, and that's terrifying. That really is. Anyway, guys, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy, and may the Great Spirit watch over us all, and may He guide us down that path that we call life.